Hi, I'm Harold Munro, Editor-in-Chief at the Vancouver Sun and Province, and joining me is our Vancouver City Hall columnist, Dan Fumano. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Harold.
Are you tired of this election yet?
It's lots of fun.
It's been a long haul, and this week, for the first time in this campaign, we got an exclusive poll from Leger that they did for us, looking at where the candidates stand and how people are feeling. What do you think the new poll tells us about the mood of Vancouverites with the election approaching?
Well, one of the things that was noteworthy off the top is that the Leger poll showed that almost 40% of the likely voters are still undecided, about a week away from election day. Now, Steve Mossop from Leger told us that level of undecided voters is not particularly unusual in a municipal election. In provincial and federal elections, where people have smaller numbers of kind of candidates to choose from, usually the level of undecided is quite a bit lower than that. But in municipal elections, especially here in BC, where we've got these at-large kind of systems with no wards, so the council choices are all over the place. But even for mayor, there's a number of different kind of high-profile, prominent choices in Vancouver, also in Surrey. So things could sort of change a lot between now and election day. This poll provides a point in time, but a lot of people are still making up their minds, obviously. So there's a lot of votes out there up for grabs.
There are some major challenges that big cities like Vancouver are facing: housing affordability, public safety, homelessness, all ranked very high with city voters when they were asked in the Leger poll to choose their most pressing and second and third most pressing issues. So knowing that this is what city residents are feeling, do you think the candidates themselves are in tune with this? Is this what they've been talking about out there?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, housing housing affordability was chosen as the number one issue by the respondents to this poll, both in the city of Vancouver and in overall for Metro Vancouver. And I think that's not a shock or a surprise. And I mean, it's been a big part of this election campaign and the previous election campaign, and probably a few before that going back. And we're certainly hearing a lot about it from the candidates. And for council and for mayor, we're hearing a lot about housing. And one issue that we are hearing more about this election than last Vancouver election is policing and public safety and crime. I don't remember that being such a big issue in 2018 in the city of Vancouver on the campaign trail, but it is certainly something we've been hearing about a lot, both in the last few weeks of the election campaign, but also really for the last year, 2 years, we've been hearing a lot of people trying to, raise issues around crime and public safety. And so that was chosen as, in the city of Vancouver, it was the fourth issue that people chose as their most important. So it's significant, but it is lower in the city of Vancouver compared to Metro Vancouver wide. I think it was a bigger issue in Surrey and some other municipalities. And I mean, it's also worth noting that, so about 9% of people put police, public safety, crime as their number one issue in Vancouver. And that's about a third as many as chose housing affordability as their number one issue.
Right. So far and away, housing affordability, number one. And then when people were asked whether this current mayor and council have done a good job, whether they're satisfied with the job they've done on a whole bunch of different issues, one of them was on housing affordability, and they didn't get a very good reception from voters on that. I think it was 10% who maybe thought they were doing a good job or they were satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, public satisfaction in a range of issues was quite low in Vancouver, and the ones where public satisfaction was the very lowest were housing affordability, and then homelessness, poverty, and mental health issues. And as Steve Mossop from Leger pointed out when I was speaking with him, he said it's worth noting that these are issues that are on top of voters' minds. These are issues we're hearing a lot about in the election, but they're also not issues that traditionally would have been considered municipal issues. These are issues that have traditionally been the responsibility of senior governments. but they've kind of become municipal issues over time. And so we're seeing it play out, but it's in the election, but it's hard to see what I guess
Right.
these
It's
all
an interesting one.
need to work together, I guess. But
Yeah, you've been covering this for a long time, Dan, covering City Hall. So it's like, what came first? Did the residents insist on it becoming municipal issues, or did councils and council candidates, political candidates, make it an election issue themselves, and now are reaping the awards for making it an issue when really they don't have ultimate control over that?
Well, I mean, they certainly have roles to play in these issues.
Right.
End of the day,
Yes.
like I mean, one of the most important roles of a municipal government is over land use and like what can be built where, and certainly in Vancouver, like the city of Vancouver, starting with sort of previous governments, did take a more active role in creating affordable housing, creating homeless shelters, trying to do stuff like that. It did take a more active role. Previous councils did, and this council as well, which of course costs money, and so property taxes have gone up, and some of it's going towards that. They've created new kinds of taxes, like the empty homes tax. So at the end of the day, people are there's a super high level of anxiety around housing in Vancouver and across Metro Vancouver. And I mean, we're increasingly hearing across BC and across Canada, these housing woes that, it's really becoming increasingly a national issue, with people's housing costs far outstripping their incomes and all kinds of things here. And obviously, the rising cost of housing is connected to rising homelessness. And so people are feeling a lot of anxiety about these issues and depression, and they're upset about these issues. So inevitably, I mean, a lot of voters or taxpayers at the end of the day maybe don't want to hear from the people they look to as their leaders that, well, that's not my job, it's not my responsibility. But it just kind of underscores how challenging these issues are. And so, I think like mayors and councils, kind of have to answer for these issues. But it's not an easy thing for City Hall to fix on its own.
Traditionally, how many incumbents could we expect to get reelected in an election, or does it vary from year to year?
I guess it varies. I mean, it's certainly a noticeable difference in this Vancouver election compared with the last one. In the last Vancouver election, 2018, you got one mayor and 10 councillors. So out of those 11 council members, you had only 3 were running for re-election and 2 were successful. Whereas this time around, out of 11 council members, all 11 are running. So the last election was bound to be a big change election. This one, you've got all 11 are running. 9 councillors are running for another council term, and then 1 councillor, Colleen Hardwick, is running for mayor with Team for Livable Vancouver. So that's one seat that's going to change. There's one council seat that's open up. But I mean, traditionally, people say that incumbency is a significant advantage, especially in a system like this, where at-large system, people are asked to choose 10 councillors out of a really, really long list. There's a lot of people running for council, and so inevitably the people who are going to have name recognition are people who are around there now. However, that being said, the incumbent councillors are going to have name recognition, as will the mayor. He's got incumbency helping him, but so Mayor Kennedy Stewart, he's running for re-election with his new party, Forward Vancouver. His approval rating is pretty low. So he does have the power of incumbency and name recognition, but his approval rating is lower than sort of the Metro Vancouver-wide average approval rating for mayors, incumbent mayors. But then, interestingly, in this Leger poll suggested that the approval rating for his council, for Vancouver City Council, is actually lower than Stewart's approval rating. Fewer people said that council is doing a good job at conducting its business than the mayor. So his rating was was below the Metro average, and then council's approval rating was actually below his.
Wow. So they're all probably a bit nervous heading into the ballot box opening on Saturday night.
You'd think so. I mean, again, with so many people undecided, and other polls have also showed high levels of undecided voters. Like, so it's this one's not out of line with other polls. But and again, the pollsters and the experts say that that's not terribly unusual. Things change a lot, in the final weeks and final days and final hours of an election campaign. A lot of people, haven't made up their mind maybe until the end. They might be choosing between, maybe they're not choosing between 5 or 6 different candidates. They might be down to one, maybe they're choosing between 2, but they may not have figured out the answer yet. And as you know, of course, a big question is not just who has the most supporters, but it's whose supporters actually turn up and vote. So if thousands and thousands of people say they love candidate A or they hate candidate B, it doesn't matter how much they say it or how much they tweet about it on the internet or write about it on Facebook or send letters to the editor or talk radio shows. That doesn't change the election necessarily the way that voting does. And so, as we know, a lot of people don't vote in municipal elections. So it can be hard to predict. These results, they're trying to pull out the likely voters, people who know the date of the election and they've identified themselves as likely voters. But at the end of the day, that's what it'll come down to, is like whose core supporters actually show up and cast a ballot.
Right. Who has a great ground game to get those votes to the polls as well. And we'll
and maybe
see what happens.
Maybe who can, in the final 9 days of the campaign, convince some of these undecided voters. If someone's on the fence trying to choose between A and B, and then, candidate B says something that, introduces an idea or something happens, and maybe they can convince someone to go from being undecided to being decided.
Right. Well, it's great going into knowing what's going to happen. It makes for an exciting weekend. I'll be watching your coverage on Saturday night, Dan, on VancouverSun.com and theprovince.com. So good luck on the weekend.
Great. Thank you.